Boker Tov and good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's Torah study session. As we learn today, this Monday, August 30th, we're learning today Chabad Chassidic philosophy, which is similar to Tanya, but it's different because Tanya is foundational Jewish meditations. Tanya is the founding text of Chabad philosophy, whereas that was the first, right? After that, Tanya, which was published, I think it was 1798, there were 7 Chabad Rebbes, including the first one, who was the author of the Tanya, who wrote literally thousands and thousands of pages, hundreds of books that fill up the Chabad library of classics that include discourses, letters, sermons, talks, and all sorts of other teachings that make up the Chabad Chassidic philosophy. So, whilst Tanya is the nucleus of that philosophy, the expansion is in the teachings of Chabad Chasidus, and that's what we're learning today. I hope that you have this book. If you don't yet have it, then I hope you can buy it. I think we spoke about it online at Facebook, on Amazon, or at Kehat online. It's called the Chassidic Heritage Series, Vayishlach Jericho Garments of the Soul. That's what we're learning today. I'm just going to plug in my computer. Garments of the Soul, and we're going to go straight into it. In just a moment, I'm just going to refresh your memory about our introduction that I gave to this particular session last week as I introduced it. So I'm going to do just a little bit of talking to explain before we get into the actual text today. And my goal is to do this actually twice a week, this week on Monday and Wednesday, and on a regular week on a Monday and a Thursday, as advertised in the Friday email. So the idea of the way that we're studying this Chassidic Heritage Series, the idea is for you to be able to own the book yourself and thus be able to review the discourse yourself, so you can actually sink your teeth into the idea instead of the way we do Tanya, which is much more, in my own words, paraphrased. And it's actually more difficult to get into the text. Maybe one day we'll get into the text of Tanya, but these discourses are shorter and therefore are much easier for us to relate to and sink our teeth into. And that's why I highly encourage you to purchase the textbook on Amazon. You can actually download it on Kindle instantaneously, or to buy it online at Kahot. That's kahotonline.org, I think it's called. kahotonline.org. I think that's the Chabad. Yeah, kahotonline.org. KEHOT online.com, whatever. Okay, so good morning to you, Rob and Soteria. Good morning to you, David. And on YouTube, I see I've got Winston and Keith Kleinick and Mickey, Cookie, and Elaine. Good. Anybody else that's with us here live or later, thank you for joining me this morning. A brief introduction, a reminder as to what this particular discourse is about. This discourse was delivered by the Rebbe when he came on the occasion of his arrival in America, which was on the 28th day of the month of Sivan. It's at the beginning of the summertime. He came on the last boat out of Portugal. And when the Nazis, were sinking the boats. And this discourse represents the Rebbe's mission statement to American Jewry. What our mission is here in America, as opposed to the style of Yiddishkeit that our grandparents or great-grandparents were accustomed to growing up in the shtetl. Everybody I know had a grandmother, a grandfather who was a rabbi, a grandmother who was a rebbitzin back there in the shtetl. But here in America, it's like a whole different story. And that's where this discourse fits in, where the Rebbe taught this discourse as a mission statement for our purpose, for our divine service, our avoda as American Jews. I see Rob Berger is waiting for the book to arrive. Ed ordered it last week. I'm not sure if it arrived. Shipping costs more than the book. Okay. Fine. Very good. Thank you very much. Good. So, the discourse, like any Hasidic discourse, is based on the verse of Torah. You read a verse in Torah, and it sounds like a story at best. Joshua sends spies to the city of Jericho, and they meet a harlot. Her name is Rachav. She tells them what the people are thinking. They make a deal. They tie a red string outside of her window so when they conquer the city of Jericho, she'll be saved. And it seems like a nice story. But what Chassidus does is that it opens our eyes to what lies beneath the surface. It's like an X-ray vision, to be able to appreciate what you're looking at, but you just don't see. It's like putting a microscope on a table and showing you what really lies on this table, right? Obviously, a microscope is going to show you all the negatives, what you don't want to know, all the germs and viruses that are on this table. But in a very positive sense, like an X-ray, Chassidus represents the soul of Torah. So just like your soul lies within the body, you're looking at a person and all you see is the body, the eyes and the fingers and the toes. You don't see their soul per se. So too, Chassidus is the soul of Torah. And if you can listen to the message of the soul of Torah, to the message of Chassidus, now you'll be able to see the inside story of what's really going on in the story. So the way this discourse is, though it's based on the spies of Joshua, it contrasts them with the spies of Moses, which is the biblical episode. In the biblical episode, in the portion of Shlach, Moses is sending spies to scout the promised land. He sends them all throughout the promised land, and that led to the epic fail, which was the spies misleading the people, telling them that we will not be strong enough to conquer the land, and the people rebelled against God, and they ended up wandering in the desert for the rest of their lives for 40 years. And was the next generation that entered the promised land, and it was that next generation, led by Joshua, that sends the spies to Jericho to scout out the land. And it's these two stories that the Rebbe contrasts in order to set the stage for our analysis. So let me begin. I'm going to start. If you have the book, that's great. And if you don't know the book, then you can just listen along. So I'm going to start on page 24 of this book, Chassidic Heritage Series, Garments of the Soul. I'm going to do it inside, not very complicated. My goal here is to be able to explain what we're going to be reading before we read it, so that when you read it inside, you can capture and grasp it for yourself. Okay? So the first paragraph is going to really contrast to us the difference between the spies of Joshua and the spies of Moses. Two very simple differences that are going to be vital when we understand the spiritual context, the soul of the story. And that's what's going to make it very, very relevant to our lives. Good morning, David Rosen from Lakewood. It's good to see you. Good to know that you're there with us. Okay. Let's see. So the two differences that we're going to discuss right now between the spies of Joshua and the spies of Moses are as follows. And Joshua, I'm on page 24. Page 24, the beginning of the discourse with the help of heaven. Shabbos, Parashas Shlach, 28th of Sivan. Shabbos Mevorchim Tammuz, 5736. That's in this discourse was printed. Spies. And Joshua sent 2 men spies. This is the verse from the book of Joshua in the Untitled Torah, in the Maimer, by this title, the discourse taught by the Alter Rebbe, which again, Alter Rebbe was the author of the Tanya, but he also wrote other discourses in a book called Likutei Torah. He explains the difference between the spies sent by Joshua and the spies sent by Moses. What's the difference? There's 2 differences regarding those sent by Moses. It is written, God said to Moses, sent for you. And as the sages interpret the meaning of for you, why did God say to Moses, send for you? Send spies according to your judgment. I'm not commanding you to send them. The spies sent by Moses were on his own volition. They were not instructed to be sent by God. The sending of spies by Joshua, however, was not by Joshua's own judgment, but by divine decree. So that's the first very important difference. Spies of Moses were sent by Moses, not by God. You send spies on your own accord, not because I'm telling you to do it. And Joshua was sending spies on his own accord. The second difference. Another difference, the spies sent by Joshua was sent only to Jericho, which is the lock of the land of Israel. It is the key. Whoever breaks into Jericho gets the rest of the land of Israel, through which they scouted the entire land. The spies sent by Moses, on the other hand, traversed the entire land to its length and its breadth. So the two differences, therefore, between the spies of Joshua and those of Moses were who appointed them and where they were sent. Who appointed them in the case of Joshua was appointed by God. In the case of Moses, it was appointed by Moses, not appointed by God. And where were they sent? The spies of Joshua were sent only to the city of Jericho. That's it. The spies of Moses were sent to the entire length and breadth of the land. They spent 40 days scouting throughout the entire land. And now comes the most beautiful insight. As the Rebbe now changes gear. Suddenly the Rebbe will put us into the elevator and send us up to the penthouse. Because here's what's going to happen right now. The Rebbe explains that the sending of the spies is not just a story about something that happened 3,500 years ago. It's actually a deeply personal story. The story of the sending of the spies is something personal to you and to me, which also happens to have been an ancient story. The Torah is not just a book which tells us a historical narrative. There is not even a word for history in Torah. We don't believe in history, something which happened way back when, and that's not necessarily meaningful or relevant to us today. If something happened a long time ago that's not really meaningful to us today, we don't care about it. The only thing we care about is something which is relevant to us today as well. And that's what's about to happen in the second paragraph of this discourse, as the Rebbe is about to share with us, that the sending of the spies, the conquering of the land of Israel, represents on a spiritual level the quest of each and every single Jew to fulfill his purpose upon this earth. What is that purpose upon this earth? To transform darkness into light, to transform unholiness into holiness, to transform dysfunctional reality into a functional reality. As we learned in Tanya in chapter 36 and 37, that God put us upon this dysfunctional earth so that we can do three things. So that we can transform the real estate in which we live into a place which is hospitable to God. So that we can transform our body in which we inhabit from a place which is inhospitable to God to a place where God is welcome. And so that we can transform our animal soul. Remember, we have two souls, a godly soul and an animal soul. So that we can transform our animal soul, that it should be transformed from incompatible with godliness to being fully compatible with godliness. For example, an animal, if you have a wild ox, and an ox and a bull in a china shop, it's very, very bad for business. But imagine you take that same ox, you put on a harness, and you tie him to a threshing floor, you tie him to a wagon, and now he's schlepping stuff for you. Now he's helping you do things that you couldn't do on your own, right? Imagine if you could do that to your animal soul, so that your animal soul is working for, not against, but for your godly soul, working for Hashem. That's the purpose of a Jew upon this earth, to transform those three things: your physical real estate in this earth, your body, and your animal soul to a place which is consistent with the will of Hashem. And that is represented by the conquest of the land of Israel, because the land of Israel was the land that was inhabited by 7 nations that were hostile to the Jewish people. 7 hostile nations. We had to attack them. We had to win, conquer them, and transform the land of the 7 nations, the land of Canaan, into the land which was the Holy Land. The 7 nations of the land of Israel, the 7 inhospitable nations, actually represent the 7 emotions of our soul. We learned again in Tanya that our soul is made up of 10 attributes, 3 intellectual and 7 emotional. The 3 intellectual are Chabad, Chachma, Bina, Das, idea, understanding, and realization. And then there are 7 emotional faculties of our soul: kindness, discipline, compassion, triumph, humility, communication, and connection. So those 7 attributes, which are the 7 emotional attributes of our soul, they represent the essence of our soul. They are the soul. How you feel about something is a very, very deep truth. If you like someone, if you don't like someone, if you love chocolate, if you hate rice, then it's very difficult to change that. The real question here in this discourse is, can you change your essence? Can you conquer? Can you transform your emotional makeup, your 7 nations? Or are you forever going to have to struggle with them? Let me give you an example. So, when somebody tells you that they just bought a brand new Rolls Royce, Lamborghini, something, right? So how are you going to respond to that? If your brother-in-law told you that he bought a Lamborghini, would you be happy for him? Or would you be envious of him? Now, I'm not asking you to answer this question, but answer it only for yourself. Hi, Peter. Nice to know that you're with us. I'm glad you're enjoying the talk. So, Amalek was not one of the 7 nations, Elaine. No. Amalek was outside of the land of Israel. So, your brother-in-law buys a Lamborghini. Are you happy for him? Or are you envious? So you might say, I'm so happy for you, but on the inside, you're burning. And you ask yourself, am I such a mean, nasty, awful human being that I can't fargin, as we say in Yiddish? I can't allow someone else to be successful, more successful than I? Am I such a nasty, lousy, rotten person? And the answer is, yeah, you are. And that's because you are a normal human being. You have a natural animal soul. You got a wilde chai, you got a selfish soul. Your animal soul is self-centered. You also have a godly soul, which is ego, which is God-centered. But your natural soul, your animal soul, is self-centered, and therefore, for your natural soul, it's all about me. All about me. If you have something which I don't have, then that's bad. Your godly soul says, you have something I don't have? I don't care. Your godly soul is not self-centered. It's God-centered. The godly soul just wants to know if what you're doing is consistent with the will of God or not. That's what he cares about. But your animal soul, completely self-centered. He's a narcissist. If you have something that I don't, then I feel terrible about it. I might not admit it to you. I might not show it to you. But deep down, that's how I feel. So can you change that? That's what this discourse is about. Can you change who you are? So when it comes to conquering the land of Israel, there's 2, not 1, but 2 approaches to conquering the land of Israel. There's the approach of Moses and there's the approach of Joshua. Moses sends spies to the entirety of the land of Israel, to all of the 7 nations, because Moses is representing the approach that you can change, you can conquer and transform your essence of your soul, your 7 emotional attributes. Joshua, on the other hand, says, that is way too much to ask for. Way too much. You cannot ask a human being to transform how they feel, who they are on the inside. You cannot change a human being. What you can do is conquer not the 7 nations, but conquer Jericho. What is Jericho? Jericho, in Hebrew, has the word smell inside of the word. Yericho. Yericho has the word reach. Reach in the middle of it. Reach means smell. So the word Jericho has the word smell inside of it. Now in the Zohar, in the book of Kabbalah, the word the idea of smell is related to garments, to clothing. Bit of a ethereal connection there, and it's not really important to get into the essence of the connection. I have to admit to you, I've never properly understood it. For all the many years that I've studied this discourse and lived it, I was never really able to get to the bottom of what the connection is between the city of Jericho, smell, and garments. But I don't think that's important. We need to get past that. And assuming that you're okay with that, Jericho means smell, which represents garments. What are the garments of the soul? Our soul is made up of 7 emotional attributes, but how do we express? How do we dress? How do we present these 7 emotions? There's only 3 gateways, 3 windows. What are these 3 windows, 3 garments? Thought, speech, and action. If you want to express your anger or your jealousy, you'll do it either through speech or through your actions or through your thought. So thought, speech, and action are the garments of the soul, whereas the essence of the soul is the 7 attributes. And this is the difference between the mission of Moses and the mission of Joshua. Moses is sending spies. He's shooting straight to the top. He says, I believe that the Jew is able to transform his essence. That's Moses. I believe, says Moses, that a Jew is able to change who he is on the inside. Every single Jew can conquer his 7 nations on his own. He can transform how he is on the inside, how he feels on the inside. Joshua says, no, you can't do that. I don't think that a Jew is able to do that. I believe that a Jew can only conquer his Jericho, his thought, speech, and action, because only his garments of the soul, his thought, speech, and action are in his full control. And I think you would agree with me, folks, that you can control what you choose to speak. Right? I don't think that's too complicated. You can control what comes out of your mouth. You know, there's a great story of a group of Jews, religious Jews, who were in a restaurant, and they were just having a good time, and they were very, very particular about the kosherness of the food and the salad and the avocado, and was the lettuce checked for bugs, and with the strawberries, and they were very, very particular about the kosherness of the food. So they were driving the owner of the restaurant crazy. Eventually, the owner of the restaurant, after he answered their 100 questions, he said to them, if you were only as careful of what comes out of your mouth as you are of what comes into your mouth, you'd be doing pretty well. Obviously, they were talking lashon hara, they were talking slander about other people. So why are you so careful with what comes into your mouth, but you couldn't care less about what comes out of your mouth? So Joshua is the one who says you can conquer your garments of your soul. You can be in full control of what you speak. You can be in full control of what you do, and you can even be in full control of what you choose to consciously think about. Now that one is a little bit more abstract, because true, if a thought just creeps into your head and you realize that you've been thinking about it without realizing, okay, I mean, that's fine. That's not something in your control. But the moment that you realize that you're thinking about a particular thought, whether you choose to continue that thought or not, that is in your control. And this is the essence of the difference between the spies of Joshua and the spies of Moses. And now we can finally understand the following. So remember, there was 2 differences between the spies of Joshua and Moses. One went to the 7 nations, one went to the city of Jericho. We understand that now. But we can also understand now why one was sent by God and one was sent by Joshua. By Moses, I mean. Moses' mission, which was to conquer the essence of your soul, God says, listen, it's a noble aspiration, but I can't command you to do that. Because a Jew is not commanded to transform his 7 emotions, to transform the essence of his soul, how he feels about everything. Because he can't. I never gave you the tools to do that. That's why God says to Moses, you want to send them on your own accord because you, Moses, the Rebbe of the generation, you believe in your students, that's great. If you want to do it, that's great, but I cannot command them to do it because I've never given them the tools to be able to do that. God doesn't command us to do something which he hasn't already given us the tools to achieve. So God says to Moses, if you're wanting them to conquer the 7 nations, to transform the very essence of their souls, that's not anything which I can endorse, because I've never given them the tools to that. But when it comes to the mission of Joshua to conquer the city of Jericho, the garments of the soul, that says God, I'm commanding you to send the spies of Joshua to conquer the city of Jericho, because I have given every single Jew the ability to control the garments of his soul, not the essence of his soul, but the garments of his soul, the thought, speech, and action. And that is something which is by divine mandate. Every single Jew is commanded to be able to control their thought, speech, and action towards self-mastery, to be able to think, speak, and do only that which is consistent with Torah, with the will of God. In other words, not to sin on a thought, speech, and action level is within the ability of every single Jew. And I want you to think about it for just a moment. While you're studying with me right now, think about it. For the past 26 minutes, you've been thinking words of Torah. You're hopefully not talking anything else. I mean, you're just listening to me. So your thought and your speech and your action are all expressive of the will of God. Now, on the inside, you might want to be watching Netflix right now. You might want to be digging into a food that might not be kosher right now. You might want to be sleeping or doing something else. But the fact that you're awake and you're with me right now means that you've made a decision that, notwithstanding what goes on in the essence of your soul, on an actual practical level, your thought, speech, and action are consistent with the will of God. And therefore, you're fulfilling exactly what you needed to do. You're conquering your Jericho right now. Let's take a look at this idea in the second paragraph of the discourse on page 24. The luck of the land. The core of this matter is this: the commandment to conquer the land in the spiritual sense is, like all the commandments of the Torah, an eternal concept for every generation. It's beautiful words. Conquering the land is not just an ancient story. It is, like all the commandments of the Torah, an eternal concept which is relevant to every generation. Conquering the land in a spiritual sense means that every Jew must conquer all the faculties and elements of his body and his animal soul. The land of Canaan, which is still inhospitable to God, and render them vessels for godliness, thereby transforming the land of Canaan into the land of Israel. The question is, have you conquered your land of Canaan? Have you conquered your body, your animal soul, and your real estate upon this earth? Now, the difference between Jericho and the rest of the land, this is everything I've spoken about. We're just doing it inside now, okay? The difference between Jericho and the rest of the land, as they are represented in the soul of man, is as follows. Jericho represents the soul's 3 garments, the garments of the soul: thought, speech, and action. What's the connection between Jericho and the garments of the soul? The connection between Jericho and garments is as follows. Jericho has at its root in Hebrew the word reach, which means smell or scent, and the garments relate to scent. Clothing is connected to smell, as alluded to in the expression of the Zohar in the scent of your garments. So since there's this expression in the Zohar, something about the scent of your garments, therefore, Chassidus draws the parallel between clothing and garments. Clothing and smell. Clothing and Jericho are now interchangeable because of this Zohar connection. Again, it's not anything which I said I understand properly, but it's okay. It doesn't really matter. Keep on going. You know what I mean? The rest of the land, that was Jericho. So Jericho represents the 3 garments of the soul. And every one of us has these 3 garments. Every one of us has thought, speech, and action with which we express our soul. The rest of the land of the 7 nations, is represented in man's 7 emotions. Thus, that's the essence of your soul. Thus, the command to Joshua to send spies was that they go only to Jericho. When God commands you to send spies to conquer your purpose in this earth, it's only to Jericho. Since thought, speech, and deed are within man's control. Hence, there is a command to every person to scout out and examine, to spy his thought, speech, and deed, and ensure that they are entirely devoted to God. So the mission of Joshua was sent by God. But the emotions of the heart are not within the control of every person. Since tzaddikim alone are in control of their hearts, our emotions we cannot control unless you're a tzaddik. We'll be talking about that in the next session. Only a tzaddik, only a perfectly righteous person is able to fully control their emotions. But an ordinary person, a Beinoni, cannot do that. Thus, regarding the spies sent by Moses to scout out the entire land, which includes the 7 nations, to examine the emotions and ensure that they are entirely devoted to God. About that mission, it is written, Shlach lecha, sent for you by your own judgment, because I, God, am not commanding you to send them. For the service of completely conquering the emotions can take place only through the revelation of the level of Moses. And this mode of service is not equally relevant to all people. Okay, so I think that pretty much explains what we learned about today. I hope that I'm being clear about this esoteric idea. I hope that is making sense to you. Please, if you have any questions or comments, then do let me know. But in the meantime, I'll say this to you, that the novelty, the chiddush that we learned today is that the conquest of the land of Israel is not just a geopolitical story. It is a philosophic reality. Remember, the Torah is not just a history book. The Torah is a life guide. So when the Torah tells us a story about a bunch of spies going to scout out the land, it's something deeply personal and relevant to us. Look at these beautiful words at the beginning of chapter 2. The commandment to conquer the land in the spiritual sense is like all the commandments of the Torah, an eternal concept for every generation. Every word in Torah is deeply relevant and meaningful. And that what Chassidus really does is that it takes every single word and episode and story in Torah and it makes it personal to us. It will take the mitzvah of Exodus from Egypt, the discussion of the Exodus from Egypt, which sounds like a very, very old story that we Jews struggle to get over, as if we have some attachments to trauma that happened 3,000 years ago, and you'd be like, Jews, come on, get over this already. It's enough already. After 3,000 years, you can move on with your lives. But really, the story of the Exodus, our obsession with the Exodus, is because there's a very deeply personal experience, which is the Exodus. It's not a story of the past, it's a story of the present. I see that Harry's with us, Harry Saperstein, that's great. Winston is making a suggestion. Maybe garment as smell equals aroma equals habit. I'm not sure why habit would be aroma. I'm not sure why you would say that. Where you at and what you're doing is what your smell, aroma, garment going to stick with you individually. Okay, I'm not sure if I completely understand that, but okay. In any event, Soteria, looks like you're enjoying it. That's great. So in closing, I'll just say this. What we learned today is that the conquest of the land of Israel is the conquest of your own soul, your own animal soul. It's the epic battle within you. Because remember, we have not one, but 2 souls within us. A godly soul and an animal soul, and they're having an epic battle. Who's going to win? Your godly soul needs to dominate over your animal soul, and that's the purpose of our soul's descent to this earth. Most people, I think, go through their lives in a state of spiritual coma. They're unconscious. But learning Chassidus makes us conscious, makes us aware of the reality of what we're experiencing, of our purpose upon this earth. And when we now study the Torah, I hope that you'll never again see the story of the conquest of the land of Israel in the Bible as a one-dimensional story. I hope that from now on, you'll see it as a 4-dimensional story, which relates not only to the past, but very, very, very much to the present in the first person. The conquest of the land of Israel is the conquest of your own soul and the mission that you were given, that God empowered you with in this earth. So what we've learned today is that you cannot conquer your 7 emotions on your own. You can conquer your garments of your soul. You can control your thought, speech, and action. But this Maimer of the Rebbe is going to give us a tremendous chiddush at the end of the discourse. The Rebbe is going to ask at the end, if this is not something which we're able to do, to conquer our 7 emotions, then why does the Torah tell us about it altogether? Why would the Torah tell us something that we can never achieve? And the answer is because the Rebbe is going to give us a code, a secret, that will indeed allow us to conquer our 7 emotions as well, that you will be able to change the way that you feel. It's extraordinary. It's going to be at the end of this discourse. In the meanwhile, please do order the book if you haven't done so already. It's Chassidic Heritage Series by Kehat, Kehat Publishers, KEHOT. You can order it online at kehatonline.com or at amazon.com. It's the Chassidic Heritage Series called Garments of the Soul. Vayishlach Yeshua. We'll carry this on Wednesday, God willing. Tomorrow we'll do Tanya. For example, when you work as a florist, your smell is from flowers, and if you work as a coffee barista, your smell is coffee. So you're saying that your smell is related to your behavior. That's very interesting. Interesting connection there, Winston. Gotcha. Anyways, thank you very much, folks. Do send me your feedback on this class. I'm modifying the style of learning. If you feel that I was too slow, too fast, too deep, too shallow, whatever. Would love to hear your feedback. Rabbi@jewishgardens.com is my email. That's rabbi@jewishgardens.com is my email. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining me today. Shalom and have a wonderful day.